This is Ian McLaren of Locked On Boston Bruins, and I am joined today by Armando Velez from Locked On Florida Panthers. And we are talking about both teams and how they stack up for the 2022-23 NHL regular season, which is just around the corner. I just want to thank everybody for making both of these podcasts part of your day every day. Locked On Panthers, Locked On Bruins, available every day on your favorite podcast app as well as on YouTube. So please do smash those subscribe buttons so that you never miss a thing. It's crazy to think that training camps begin this week, and the Atlantic Division is going to be super interesting once again. And happy to be joined by Armando today to talk about the Panthers and the Bruins and what should be two top four teams again in the division. You agree with that, Armando?
I would say so. I know there's other teams who kind of took a step forward with Ottawa in the offseason. Detroit is getting better. Buffalo, there's still a question mark over them, and Montreal,
Yeah.
it's still a gonna be a still gonna be a little bit of a long rebuild for them. It's a 4 to 5 year project for them, but there's still a lot of questions about the what the order could look like in this
Mm-hmm.
division, and of course, age is a factor as well for different teams, very based on experience, re-signing players who have been around for cup runs so there's still a lot of questions within this division, even though on paper what about the top four on paper a lot of fans think are gonna look the same.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I actually think Buffalo might surprise some people, but their goaltending a little questionable. I still think that Montreal bottom of the division for sure, and I'm not too upset about that. I guess I wanted to start talking about the Panthers. Obviously, there was the huge blockbuster trade this summer with Matthew Tkachuk coming in, Jonathan Huberdeau, Mackenzie Weegar going out. Um, how does the team look after that huge deal? In my mind, Kachuk, Huberto kind of balance each other out, although they do have different games. The loss of Uyghur, though, for me is pretty big for the Panthers. What was your overall take on that whole blockbuster trade that happened this summer?
It, it it was a situation where Uyghur was always going to be seen as the guy who was going to be a rental for the Panthers. And
Hmm.
it's funny because on Friday's episode of Locked On Panthers, we actually kind of spoke about contract for Uyghur in relation to a Boston Bruin of Hampus Lindholm. Elliot Friedman
Hmm.
spoke about how his contract could look a little bit like Hampus Lindholm's, around
Okay.
like 6 to 6.5, and then Huberdeau just got paid 10.5. So the Panthers were never going to pay both guys. That
Right.
that was just the truth. And combine that, the Panthers would have been over the cap. Barkov's would have been in his second year of his deal. You still have the Sergei Bobrovsky contract, along with having to pay Spencer Knight next offseason. You still have
Yeah.
some RFAs next year on your team in Grigori Denisenko and Alexei Hepaniemi that you need to create a little bit of space for. So it was the philosophy really is, if you can get a guy out a year too early in a year instead of a year too late, Bill Zito is looking to apply that philosophy for the Panthers in order to create more long term flexibility. Because if you were to keep those guys, your window would be around like 1 to 2 years to try to win a
Hmm.
cup, and of
Right.
course there's a possibility that if those contracts don't age well, that the Panthers could plateau. So that was a situation so that the Panthers can create more flexibility and $15 million in cap space next year. For the
Hmm.
Panthers, it gives them a lot of flexibility long term and a lot of buyout money. About $6.5 million with Keith Yandel and Scott Darling on their books. A lot of that is going to come off next season.
Right. Right. Oh, that's yeah. I didn't really think of it in those terms. That's really interesting. Um, One thing that I was wondering about as well. A lot of people talk about on the Boston Bruins side of things. I'm sure we'll get into it here in a few minutes. The injuries to Brad Marchand, Charlie McAvoy. Um, Not a lot of people talking about the fact that Anthony Duclair, who was very productive for the Panthers last season, also starting the season on the shelf. How detrimental do you think that injury will be, and are there guys who can kind of step up in his absence?
It creates kind of a ripple effect for the Panthers across the lineup because there's a possibility that if Anthony Duclair had not gotten hurt during offseason training, he's kind of scheduled maybe to come back around like January, February, around the All-Star break.
Mm-hmm.
Achilles injuries are hard to recover from, and
Yeah.
it's a mental side of it too because of how you take that first step of going across the ice. How are you gonna? But of
Mm.
course, Anthony Duclair is going to have plenty of rehab work himself and skating before he even steps foot on the ice for a game. So in order to get the mind right, in order for him to get into game speed, I believe that Anthony Duclair is going to work really hard in order to overcome the mental side of
Mm.
that injury. But of course, your body is going to there's so much that you can deny of what your body says to you,
Mm-hmm.
but of course going out there and putting in the work as well. But as far as the ripple effects of the lineup, last year Sam Reinhart mostly played on the third
Mm.
line with Anton
Oh
Lundell
yeah.
and Mason Marchment. Mason Marchment's out of the
Mm-hmm.
picture now, so it creates a different shifts in the lineup. We could see a Rudolph Balcers who plays on the left wing.
Mm.
He could play on the right, possibly. He can play both sides. Colin White is a guy who the Florida Panthers signed in the offseason, struggled with injuries when he was with Ottawa. So that a possibility for him to play possibly on the second line along with Sam Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk, assuming that Paul Maurice puts Tkachuk on that second line.
Right.
So and you never know. I don't necessarily I don't hope that this is a long-term fix for the Panthers as far as putting Patrick Hornquist on the second line. I've seen some projections from different websites saying that putting Patrick Hornquist on that second line. And if they do, I hope that it's only for a little bit,
Mm.
not for a good stretch of the season. So we could see a little bit of that throughout the season. And it's not for Florida Panther fans to freak out if they do see
Right.
that because it's a veteran presence on the team, and sometimes if you need to get a greasy goal. Sometimes Patrick Hornquist is that help for the
Right.
Panthers, but
Right.
it creates a little bit of shuffling for the Panthers.
And the last thing I was wondering about is the Bruins Panthers kind of similar in that they have established veteran goalies paired with guys who are kind of up and coming, the next wave of potential star goalies in the NHL. Now the salary disparity between Linus Olmark, Jeremy Swayman, and Spencer Knight, Sergei Bobrovsky is a little slimmer. How do you see that pairing working out? Is it kind of a 1A, 1B, or is Bobrovsky still the guy? How are they bringing Spencer Knight along there?
It's the thing about Spencer Knight is he really came alive mostly throughout the second part of the season. Really struggled, sent down to the AHL around December, right before the COVID bug hit really the entire league
Right.
and really the world. But for Spencer Knight, he looked a lot better in the latter part of the season. Sergei Bobrovsky was the least of the Panthers' problems in the postseason. It was really the lack of
Mm-hmm.
scoring on the power play. 1 for 31 is just not going to cut it for
Yeesh.
the
Yeah.
Panthers. And really, the three players who are the best for the Panthers, Sergei Bobrovsky, Claude Giroux, and Carter Verhaeghe. Those were the three guys, and none of those players include the core three of the Panthers in Barkov, Ekblad, and Huberdeau. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
Huberdeau no longer being with the Panthers anymore. The star players were when the lights were on the the brightest, the main guys were not the ones to shine for the Panthers in the postseason. But as far as the goalies, I think it's still Bobrovsky's net for now. I do want to see Sergei Bobrovsky succeed. I do. The cap hit is not really favorable for the Panthers. Of course, it really straps them in like what they could really do, and a lot of things that people aren't really talking about as far as the trade for Matthew Tkachuk is what if the Florida Panthers had a goalie around like 5 million in on their cap instead of 10.
Right.
That wouldn't have influenced the trade as much because you're trying to get some cap relief for the future. But for a lot of people also have Spencer Knight as a breakout candidate, even in fantasy leagues as well. So if I'm thinking, I don't think 41 and 41 split is going to be something for Spencer Knight and Sergei Bobrovsky. I can see something more about like 50-30 around there.
Okay.
For or 51-31 if you want to be exact with the games. But but I can see somewhere around there as Spencer Knight's workload starts to increase, and then of course performance is going to play a lot into it as well. But this is the time for Spencer Knight to get a little bit of more of a workload to see if he can really handle the a bigger load, and hopefully an 82 game, not exactly 82, but more of like a 50-60 a few years down the line.
Right, right. Very cool. All right, we're going to talk a bit about the Bruins coming up, and then give our projections for our respective teams. But first, just a quick word about BetOnline.net, your number one source for all pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. You can find all the latest football developments, game matchups, news, podcasts, including next week's games. BetOnline is also your continued source for all sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. It's the easiest and fastest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events. Major League Baseball nearing the postseason, MMA, boxing, golf, NHL, NBA right around the corner as well. Head to their website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action at BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, let's talk about the Bruins, Armando. What do you want to know?
What I want to know is how is it received within the fan base on the new direction that they're going with at head coach. I mean, one thing that the Florida Panthers and the Boston Bruins do have in common is they're bringing in new guys. The Florida Panthers are bringing a guy like Paul Maurice, who has 20 plus years of experience with two different teams, three if you count the Hartford Whalers, and the Boston Bruins. Don Sweeney made a bold move and a surprising move in firing Bruce Cassidy. Of course, later signing with the Vegas Golden Knights. We on Lock on Panthers talked a little bit about Bruce Cassidy possibly coming to Florida. And really, the Boston Bruins going into a different direction and hiring Jim Montgomery. Of course, the end of his stint in Dallas didn't end well, and of course had a few years being an assistant coach behind Craig Berube in St. Louis before eventually getting the job in Boston. Of course, a little bit of experience, not a ton, but what do you think about the change of direction? First of all, in that for the Bruins.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, the decision to fire Bruce Cassidy was incredibly unpopular among the fan base. He had been one of the most successful head coaches in the game over the last, 6 seasons that he was in Boston. They ranked very high in a lot of important metrics. They had regular season success, made it all the way to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final in 2019. Not as much playoff success lately, which was a strike against him. And the rationale behind the decision was that, in part, he perhaps wasn't relating well to some of the younger players. So that didn't go over well. And there was some speculation as to who might be coming in. I think Jim Montgomery, out of everybody who was available, probably one of the more likable, popular decisions that the Bruins could have made. He had his personal issues that caused him to be fired in Dallas. Those seem to be under control. He's in recovery. He's got a good support system, which is great to hear. He was, by all accounts, very well liked in St. Louis. I think even David Perron, when when Montgomery was hired by the Bruins, tweeted about how good of a coach that they were getting, and everybody so far is saying a lot of good things about him. So I think there'll be kind of a fresh perspective. Montgomery knows that he doesn't have to come in and kind of reinvent the wheel. The Bruins were a 100-point team last season. He knows that there's a lot of good pieces in place to succeed. He just kind of has to push the right buttons. And I think he's well situated for a good first season with the Boston Bruins, with Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci back in the mix. There's a lot of, strong leadership there. And so I think once the dust has all settled, again, everybody probably would have been fine with Bruce Cassidy coming back. There wasn't much of an appetite among the fan base for him to be let go. But the fact that they were able to bring in Montgomery, I think there is a sense of kind of maybe a clean slate or just a fresh approach to the Bruins. And I think people are overall pretty excited about the new head coach.
Mm-hmm. And Krejci coming back from Czechia. Patrice Bergeron signing a 1-year deal, a veteran deal, 2.5. Mr. Selke. And, of course, the injuries for the Boston Bruins. Of course, Brad Marchand's going to be out for a little bit. Charlie McAvoy, who we spoke about on Locked On Panthers just a few months ago about the Panthers possibly trading up back in 2016 for Charlie McAvoy, but it didn't end up happening. The Florida Panthers ended up drafting Henrik Borgstrom in that draft, and Grzelcyk will also be missing for the Boston Bruins as well. What's the thoughts on the injuries and what are you anticipating the first 2 months of the Boston Bruins season to look like?
Yeah, I mean it's gonna be a challenge for sure. Losing Charlie McAvoy, who was in the Norris conversation last year. Could have established himself as a finalist this year if he had a full season. That can't be overstated how much they're going to miss him on the back end. Having said that, you mentioned Hampus Lindholm earlier. He's said, he's used to carrying a heavy load in Anaheim, and his presence will certainly be a help. They're a bit thin on the right side. So that's going to be a challenge, and it's going to have to be everybody, all hands on deck defensively. I think they can maybe absorb Marchand's absence a bit more. They brought in Pavel Zacha from the New Jersey Devils, who has a relationship with some Bruins. He's been training in Boston in the offseason for a few years. Already had a place there, was pretty comfortable. He's going to get an opportunity to ride with Bergeron and Jake DeBrusk on the top line. So if he can pop to begin the season, hopefully there's not a huge drop-off in production. Really, it's going to be the second line, I think, or the so-called second line that's going to carry these guys to begin the season. Taylor Hall, David Krejci, David Pastrnak, they need to come out, guns blazing to begin the season to help carry this team offensively. Thankfully, Marchand and McAvoy, they should be back around the beginning of December. So it's not a half-season loss per se. They just need to kind of stay afloat in the playoff race, and then once those guys come back, hopefully they can really get it going for when the games matter most. And that's going to be a big test for Jim Montgomery to kind of come in and make sure that there isn't a huge drop-off without those guys, and that he can get the most out of the players who are in the lineup. Bergeron, Krejci being in the mix, their core leadership guys, and they're not coming back to not play in the playoffs, so they're going to be pushing the guys to everybody to raise their game while those guys are out for sure. But still, it is going to be a challenge for sure. There's no question about it.
Mhm. And looking at the projected lines on Daily Faceoff, it's crazy to see that the perfection line not all together on one. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
injuries and of course spreading it out throughout the lineup to create more balance. For and also I when you spoke about earlier with Bruce Cassidy about maybe a rift in the locker room for young guys. I mean, Jake DeBrusk, let's talk a little bit about him. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he rescinded his trade request right before the trade deadline. They gave him an extension. They did him a little bit of a favor. Hey, we're still going to give you the money you want, but
Mm-hmm.
still revisit this trade a little bit. And for Boston, it's great to see that everything as far as that side is a little bit hashed out between management. So maybe a little bit of writing on the wall that it was maybe Jake DeBrusk that Bruce Cassidy was really having a hard time creating a relationship with.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. He was one of those guys. He was asked about rescinding the trade request last week, and he kind of it was kind of a vague answer. He wouldn't really say one way or the other, but it's pretty clear that the decision to replace Bruce Cassidy played a role in Jake DeBrusk being willing to play out that 2-year contract extension in Boston. Um, and there was, Jake DeBrusk, he's been very open about struggling through COVID-19, not only physically because of the virus, but also just mentally with isolation and all that kind of stuff. And perhaps Bruce Cassidy's, didn't really have much of a therapeutic approach to handling that. I think Trent Frederick was another guy that was kind of afraid to make mistakes out there. He wasn't really sure of his role. Did they want him to kind of be more offensive minded? Did they want him to just hit and throw down every once in a while? Just kind of some mixed messages for some of these younger guys. And yeah, it's going to be up to Jim Montgomery to come in, kind of tell these guys what the role is, what's expected of them, but also kind of do it in a way that's not pandering to the players, but maybe a more player-friendly approach will certainly go a long way to getting those guys geared up to succeed under the new head coach for sure.
And definitely a new voice has a lot to do with that as well, and a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of a different confidence possibly going into the season possibly for Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in segment number 3, we are going to discuss where we think these teams are going to finish, and on paper we see what these rosters look like, but with injuries to both teams, maybe we could have some differing opinions here on this crossover edition. So we're going to discuss that next here on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Boston Bruins. All right, Ian, finishing out this crossover edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Boston Bruins. So, of course, Boston finishing in the first wild card spot uh, before being eliminated in round 1.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but of course, injuries are hard to deal with, but they're part of the game. And last year when we were discussing during our preseason crossover, your projection was right around where the Boston Bruins actually finished. So you got that
Mm-hmm.
correct. So give yourself a little bit of a pat on the back there. But what about this time? It's a little bit of a different type of adversity. Of course, we discussed the new coach, we discussed injuries, but
Yep.
where are the Boston Bruins going to finish this season for you?
I mean, it's kind of balanced out by having Krejci back, adding a guy like Pavel Zacha over Eric Haula, which I think is an improvement. And of course, the injuries to begin the season. If the Bruins were fully healthy to begin the season, I'd have maybe higher expectations for them, or maybe think that they could challenge for one of the three Atlantic Division playoff spots. And I still think it's possible because of some questions in Toronto, specifically with goaltending.
Hmm.
Uh, I think Tampa could take a step back after having lost a couple guys. There's some questions in Florida even, but I still think the Bruins probably um, like a third place at best in the Atlantic. Probably a wild card team once again. Um, and yeah, if they had Marchand and McAvoy from day one, everybody healthy, I think I would say that they're better than last season, um, on paper, anyways. But because of those injuries, you can't discount losing those two guys to begin the season. So that it could be a struggle to rack up some points early on, and I think that will keep them a bit lower. I'm not too worried about Ottawa or Detroit catching any of the top four teams in the Atlantic. I still think they're a little ways away. Ottawa has the scoring. I don't see them really having the defense. And same with Detroit. They added some goaltending, uh, but offensively, they don't really they don't really blow me away. So I don't think there's going to be a changing of the guard yet this season. There could be some teams in the Metro that challenge for one of these wild card spots. I can see New Jersey being a bit better. Um, Columbus with Gaudreau, maybe. The Islanders could sneak up again. So I think it might be a challenge in that respect. But again, I still see the Bruins as kind of a playoff team for sure. Uh, Probably fourth in the Atlantic once again. I could see them maybe moving up and sneaking into third if there's a big drop off on one of those other teams. But I don't see much change that way. Basically, what do you think about the Panthers? What are your expectations for this team this season?
I think the floor of it would be fourth for the Panthers, but I think that's very unlikely for the Panthers. Um, but I think I for me it doesn't matter where they finish in that top three. They're now in that position where they have made they're now on a streak of making the playoffs consistently. This is their longest streak ever in their franchise's history. So now the players in the locker room, the fan base, the mindset is to just try to get in. As long
Right.
as you're in, and then the rest of the way, try to take care of that in its own. I mean, Tampa Bay. I mean, even with Tampa Bay, they didn't have home ice advantage in any round
Mm-hmm.
this past postseason, and they made it all the way to the Stanley Cup final. Yeah, that team was a little banged up by the time they got to the final, and it really showed against Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as they get in, that's really what matters. And just now they're in, last year was all about trying to get that number one seed, trying to beat Tampa Bay, trying to get that home ice. Of course, you still want that advantage. Take any advantage that you can against your state rival, the
Mm-hmm.
team that you're trying to get over, because now it's 2 years that they've beaten Florida, and defeating Florida kind of in embarrassing fashion last postseason. But really, it's just trying to get in and then take care of things from there. Of course, you
Mm-hmm.
want the better record,
Right.
but it's really about a new voice in Paul Maurice as
Right.
well, trying to because the inexperience of Andrew Burnett kind of showed in the most
Mm.
recent postseason, and of course, Paul Maurice doesn't have the best track record with being in the postseason and succeeding. Only one Stanley Cup final appearance, but there
Right.
was that stretch before Winnipeg fell off. Just recently that he was making the postseason
Mm-hmm.
in consecutive years, including a few points off of a President's Trophy behind the year Nashville won it.
Right.
and getting to the Western Conference Final against Vegas as well. So there's still room to grow, and there's still room for this Panthers team to really receive Paul Maurice's message and just to take it from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, home ice advantage. Look at the Toronto Tampa series last year. It didn't really work out for the Maple Leafs in hilarious fashion once again. So it's just all about getting there. And yeah, it's going to be super interesting to see how the Atlantic Division is going to play out. What do you think about the Ottawas, the Detroits? Do you think they have what it takes to be playoff teams, or do you think it's still going to be a pretty clear divide among the top and bottom four in the Atlantic?
It's crazy because last year the difference between the fourth place team and the fifth place team was about maybe like 30 points around
Yeah,
there.
I
So
know.
I think it's going to be a lot. I think it's going to be a lot closer to make up that. Think about how many points you got to make up for that, and how many
Yeah,
games you need to win versus other teams losing. That's a
yeah,
16. That's 16 games. Or
yeah.
either 8 more that one wins, or 8 more that the other one loses. That one team would have to make up. So I think it's going to be more around the 15 point difference between the two. Of course, the we Florida Panther fans are very familiar with Claude Giroux, half a season
Yeah.
in Florida. Now, of course, really going back home to Ontario, and of course, their trade for Alex DeBrincat. There's a lot of exciting things for Ottawa in their future, and of course,
For
they're going to
sure.
get a new arena in downtown in a better location. At least
Yeah.
that's what they're trying to do. So that it's encouraging for that fan base in Ottawa, and I would be encouraged too. Detroit, of course, more of their prospects are starting to come into the mix and starting to join the NHL team, and there's going to be a lot of excitement even in Grand Rapids for them. But of course, the inexperience it experienced as well, playing on a playoff level and even and on the NHL every night. I don't know if Detroit is this is the year for Detroit, and of course for the wild card you talked about for Boston, about New Jersey and Columbus challenging them. New Jersey really is the question and goal. Is Mackenzie
Yeah.
Blackwood going to be able to bounce back this season? And they got the Vitek Vanacek, who
Right.
played in the first 2 games for the Washington Capitals before he was pulled
Right.
in favor of Ilya Samsonov. So what's the question in goaltending? Of course, you got 2 great centers in Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier there, and of course Columbus, Patrick Laine, who when the Florida Panthers played him the last time, he was just on a big goal scoring streak, so he can score
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
best
He's
of
on
them, along
fire.
with Johnny Gaudreau as well. So those are the teams that I could see really challenging for that on the Metro
Yeah.
side. Don't know necessarily how the Islanders are gonna
Yeah.
look with their lack of moves this offseason as well. Washington's getting a little older. Don't
Yeah.
know. They got better in goal though, but they're still a little bit of an older squad. So really going to be a lot of it. I think it's going to be come down to really. I don't think it's going to be that everyone clinches within like a week or two before.
Right.
I think it's going to come down possibly to the last game or two of the season.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited. It's gonna be very interesting to see the Eastern Conference how it shakes out, and hopefully we can connect at some point again throughout the season. Where can people find Locked On Florida Panthers? Where can people find you on social media, Armando?
All right, for the people watching on the YouTube feed, of course, you can see it right. Hold on, let me point it right here. LO_FLA Panthers. And then, of course, under my name, you see Mondo Man 12. You can follow me there on Twitter. It's some good times here in South Florida with the Panthers being 2-0 in their prospect tournament, as they're about to face off the Nashville Predators and to finish, hopefully go 3-0. And of course, the Miami Dolphins being 2-0. Of course, the Bruins feed there's a lot of Patriot fans there, so
Yep.
it's going good here in South Florida right now during South Florida, and we have South Florida also has the Cy Young Award, likely Cy Young Award winner in baseball in Sandy Alcantara. So good times here in South Florida.
Life
You'll
is
see a
good.
lot of those tweets there from myself speaking about those. But for my listeners, tell everybody where they can find you online.
I'm at Locked NHL Bruins for the podcast. People can find me at Ian C. McLaren and search out Locked On Boston Bruins in your podcast app and on YouTube to subscribe there. And I must say, to close, I'm in a big Miami state of mind too because I've been binge watching Ballers on HBO lately, so I'm really enjoying that show. So it's just feeling Miami a lot these days. Anyways, just want to remind people that the Locked On NHL podcast is ready and waiting for your second listen. Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute update on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world with Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute podcast. Thanks again for making Locked On Panthers, Locked On Bruins part of your day every day. And Armando and I will talk to you all on our respective shows again tomorrow. Thanks, Armando.
Thank you, Ian.
Take care, man.